in terms of foreign policy, where are we today? I mean, it's a bit of a disaster, isn't it, frankly?
Well, it's a monumental disaster, Alex, and the events of the last few weeks have been absolutely tragic. The withdrawal from Afghanistan is the biggest US foreign policy folly, certainly since the Vietnam era. And the world superpower has been fundamentally humiliated on the world stage. And I think that Joe Biden's overall approach, his lack of leadership, has been hugely damaging for US prestige across the world. And this has also, of course, emboldened the enemies of the United States. And so we're living in a far more dangerous time now, thanks to the awful failure of the Biden administration's foreign policy.
I mean, there doesn't seem to be any foreign policy. I mean, what I'd describe it is a complete absence of foreign policy. Does he have a long-term plan? Does he have a sort of geopolitical agenda?
Well, I think that Biden is a fairly clueless leader, actually, in many respects, and he's even weaker than President Obama was. And Biden basically, I think, advances a sort of isolationist U.S. foreign policy, which is extremely dangerous. He also spends, a great deal of time basically in the bunker together with his closest allies, without listening actually to public opinion or the opinion of other world leaders. And for example, he wouldn't even take the British Prime Minister's phone call for 36 hours after the fall of Kabul. So this is a president who is increasingly isolated on the international stage. He's quite delusional, I think, in many respects. And the whole Afghanistan operation, I think, will damage America's reputation and standing for decades to come. It's going to take a long time to recover from this. And of course, the United States won't fully recover until there's a new administration in place that is going to reverse a great deal of the rot that has been set in place by the Biden presidency.
What strikes me as bizarre is this was a deputy president who actually worked with Zardari, who was the leader of Pakistan at the time, to capture Osama bin Laden in that country. He was heavily involved in that. And yet now here we are, 20 years on after 9/11. And he seems to have withdrawn from the game. What has gone on with Joe Biden? Is it that he's too old? Has he lost interest? Is it that he feels a political pressure to maintain this policy of withdrawing entirely from the Middle East? It's left a lot of us in the West quite speechless.
Well, Biden certainly prided himself on being someone with a great deal of foreign policy experience. After all, he was a senator for many decades, former vice president, and he had all this rhetoric about restoring, America's standing in the world after the Trump era. The reality is, I think that President Trump was a far stronger and tougher U.S. leader on the international stage. I mean, Trump was a far better commander-in-chief, and Biden has actually fundamentally undermined, I think, America's standing, and he's operating as though he's some sort of foreign policy novice, frankly, extremely amateurish in his approach. I had the opportunity to meet President Trump on several occasions, and I have to say that President Trump would never have thrown the United States under the bus, and Trump would never have humiliated the United States in the fashion that Joe Biden did over Afghanistan. And Trump believed in American exceptionalism and the greatness of the United States as the world superpower. But Joe Biden has thrown all of this out of the window. Actually, it's a staggering failure of leadership on so many fronts. And also, of course, Joe Biden has succeeded in trashing the US-UK special relationship as well. He's no friend of Great Britain.
No, it does look rather shaky. In the absence of there seeming to be any tied together foreign policy emanating from America right now, what should be the foreign policy? If you were there in the company of Joe Biden, if you had his ear and you're able to say to him, look, you've made a mistake, but this is how you can rectify it, where would you begin?
Well, Joe Biden has to lead on the world stage. And at the moment, the United States is in retreat. So that's the first thing. The US has to lead. He has to act like the commander-in-chief. And the United States must not disengage on the international stage. And also the United States has to take the war to the terrorists. You have to stand up to the likes of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in a very aggressive fashion. And that includes in Afghanistan itself. Of course, the United States and its strategic position has been hugely undermined by the closing of US bases in Afghanistan, which is a monumental folly. But certainly, as things stand now, the United States has to take action against ISIS and Al Qaeda operating inside Afghanistan. It has to take action where necessary against the Taliban as well. We're living in a more dangerous world now compared to the pre 9/11 era, thanks to the staggeringly bad actions of the Biden administration. And so President Biden has to act like the leader of the free world. He has to act like a commander-in-chief, and he has to project aggressively and strongly US global power on the international stage. He simply isn't doing that at the moment. He's a weak-kneed president who, in my view, I think is the worst US president of modern times.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.